Small efforts can result in huge impacts. One rotten apple can turn a whole basket. Every little bit contributes to the whole. One little spark can start a forest burning. Every little bit contributes to the whole. And one idea can start a revolution, turn this world around. One little push can start the ball rolling. Every little bit contributes to the whole. Well, now if every single person smiled at their neighbor, every little bit would contribute to the whole. If every single person lent a helping hand, every little bit would contribute to the whole. One small candle glowing all alone can illuminate the dark. It takes one step to start the longest journey. Every little bit contributes. Every little bit contributes. Every little bit contributes to the whole. Ba ba da ba da ba 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 da da ba da da da. The next time you have a huge job to do that feels insurmountable, whether it's cleaning your basement or healing from an injury, think about this old colonial American tale about a grandfather clock. Tick-a-tock, 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 clock, tick-tock, clock, tick-a-tock, tick-tock, tick-a-tock, 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 clock, tick-a-tock, clock, tick-a-tock, tick-tock. There once was a grandfather clock with a huge pendulum that swung back and forth, keeping time for the family in a big old house, ticking and talking all day long, keeping time for the family in a big old house. One day that old clock started thinking, I'm going to tick for 100 years. Now that's once each second, 60 times a minute, 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. For 100 years. Now the clock was good at numbers and decided to figure out, how many times will I have to tick in 100 years? And it came out to be 3,153,600,000 times. Woo! 3,153,600,000 times. 3,153,600,000 times. That's a lot of work. And just the thought of doing that much work made the old clock so tired, so tired. It quit ticking. Before long, everyone in the house was late. No one knew what time it was. No one knew when to go to bed, when to go to work. Why, you even didn't know when to take the muffins out of the oven. People would pass the clock in the hall and mutter nasty things right to its face. Why, you used to be reliable. And the cook complained, well, I burnt the muffins because of you. The only one in the household who understood the clock's problem was a little girl. She happened to be excellent at mathematics. And one day she stood before the clock and she said, Grandfather Clock, I think I have figured out your problem. You see, I think that you think in 100 years you're going to have to tick 3,153,600,000 times, and you're wrong. You're going to have to tick more than that. You forgot to count leap years. So it's an even bigger job than you imagine. However, you don't have to do it all at once. You only have to tick once a second. You could do that big job just one tick at a time. One at a time. Ooh, one tick at a time. Well, now that sounded much better. To the clock, tick-a-tock, 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 clock, tick-a-tock, clock, tick-a-tock, tick-tock, tick-a-tock, 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 clock, tick-a-tock, clock, tick-a-tock, tick-tock. Here is an ancient story from China about honoring small efforts. Once there was an elephant, a huge creature who stomped down the road. He stopped, for there in his path he saw a little hummingbird. The hummingbird was lying on its back with its little feet sticking straight up in the air. The elephant looked down and said, "Little hummingbird, what are you doing down there on the ground? I almost stepped on you." And the little bird said, "Well, I have heard that the sky might fall, and when it does, I want to be ready to do my part to help hold it up." The elephant laughed and said, "Oh, you're too small to make much of a difference at all if the sky should fall." And the little bird replied, "Well, what you say is true. I'm small. Yes, that is true. But each of us must do what each of us can do. And this is what I can do." Well, if it happens to folks, there's probably a folk tale about it. Celebrating the small is an ancient idea, for small efforts can result in big impact. And small creatures are just as important as big ones. Ba-dum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba-da-da, rum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba, da-dum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba-da-da-dum. King Solomon was sleeping under a tree when along came a bee. The bee alighted upon King Solomon's nose. The bee was found. Solomon swatted the creature to the ground just as he was about to crush it with his foot. The bee looked up and said, "Please, please, 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 don't kill me. I am just a bee." "Just a bee?" Solomon raged. "You're a despicable little creature, insignificant and small. You almost stung me on my nose. I would have been the laughing stock of the court with a big bulbous nose. You are despicable." "But if you let me go," said the bee, "I promise you I will help you someday." "How could you ever help me? You are just a bee and I am the great King Solomon." But Solomon made a wise choice at that moment. He calmed his rage and decided to let the bee fly away. Ba-dum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba-da-da, rum-bum-ba, 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 rum-bum-ba-da-da-dum. In time, the great Queen of Sheba came to King Solomon's court. She came not with an army this time. Instead, she came with roses. Her servant girls lined up in front of King Solomon's throne. Each one held a beautiful rose. The queen said, "If you are so wise, then let this task be done. King Solomon, just look at the roses and point to the living one. Ah, these roses look perfect in shape and feel. But they're sculptures of roses, and only one of them is real. If you are so wise, let this task be done. Just look at the roses and point to the living one." Solomon looked at the roses. He could not tell the difference between truth and illusion, and he thought, "Oh, there will be a war. I will fail this test." When suddenly, bum bum ba rum bum ba da da dum, in through the window flew the bee, and by demonstration chose, for attracted by the pollen and the scent, the bee alighted upon the single living rose. Solomon saw the bee, and the bee saw Solomon. Bzz, and then the bee flew out the window again. Solomon stood tall before them all and pointed to the truth. A great cry went up. "Our king is wise! Our king is wise!" The Queen of Sheba bowed low and said, "Yes, it is so." And she turned and rode off with her host. Ba-dum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba-da-da, rum-bum-ba, 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 rum-bum-ba-da-da-dum. That night, while Solomon sat alone in his chamber, thinking about the day, he said to himself, "I may be wise, but I am not as wise as that bee." And he promised himself, "I will never despise any living creature, be the creature big or small, be the creature coarse or fine, for everything has a sacred place in nature's design." Rum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba, rum-bum-ba-da-da, rum-bum-ba,